Imagine waking up one day and realizing that every single action you've ever taken, from the smallest craving for sugar to the grandest ambition you've ever pursued, has been driven by a silent, invisible force you never truly chose. You sit up in bed, light spilling across the room, and the realization hits like a tidal wave. You are not free. You are compelled. Every decision, every longing, every plan has been built on a foundation you didn't lay. The hunger you feel isn't just for food or success or affection. It's for something deeper, something unspeakable, a restless yearning that seems to have no end. You've achieved some things you once thought would satisfy you. A relationship, a job, a possession, a victory. But each time the satisfaction faded, as if it had been leaking from a cracked vessel. You tell yourself it's normal, that you simply need more money, more recognition, more love, more freedom. And yet the hunger remains. It grows, even as you feed it. Like a thirst that salt water only worsens, your striving leaves you emptier than before. This isn't just your story, it's ours. The entire modern world orbits around this cycle of desire. Ads promising a better life, self-help books offering secret formulas, influencers flaunting curated happiness, all whispering the same message. You could be fulfilled, if only you had this. But deep down, you know something is off. Why does the finish line always move further away? Why does the triumph never taste as sweet as you imagined? Why do moments of success dissolve into new forms of craving almost instantly? Arthur Schopenhauer once called this force the will, a blind, ceaseless striving that underlies all life. According to him, it is not you who wills, but the will that lives through you. This idea is unsettling, almost insulting to our modern sense of autonomy. You believe you're making choices, but what if your choices are just the masks of something deeper, an instinctive, relentless hunger at the root of existence itself? And if this is true, if every plan, every dream, every pleasure is just another expression of the same restless will, then what does freedom even mean? Are you free when you can chase whatever you want, or only when you can stop wanting? Look around. The more sophisticated our society becomes, the more cleverly it feeds our desires. New technologies promise liberation but often deepen addiction. Social media promises connection but breeds envy. Self-improvement promises peace, but often masks perfectionism. We call it progress, but maybe it's just the will wearing different costumes. Are we advancing, or are we running faster in the same invisible cage? Even your highest aspirations, to help others, to create beauty, to discover truth, may still be bound up in this restless striving. How do you know when your pursuit is authentic, and when it's just another layer of the same hunger? If Schopenhauer was right, then even your noblest motives might be chains, not wings. There's a moment, if you're honest with yourself, when you can feel this paradox in your own life. You achieve a long-awaited goal, and for a moment you feel relief. Not joy, not peace, just the end of tension. But then another desire rises. Another goal appears. The cycle begins again. The relief was not fulfillment. It was only a pause. The hunger was never truly fed. And so, a question begins to burn at the edges of your mind. If everything you do is driven by desire, and if desire is endless, can you ever be free? What would it even look like to live without this ceaseless inner pull, to no longer be a slave to what you want or fear? Would you become apathetic, lifeless, or would you discover a deeper, quieter form of freedom, the kind Schopenhauer hinted at, but never fully captured? Could it be that peace is not something you acquire, but something that emerges when desire loosens its grip? As you sit with these questions, the world around you begins to look different. Every advertisement, every promise of happiness, every internal craving now appears less like an opportunity and more like a clue pointing towards something hidden, something you've been avoiding. The real mystery is not what you want next. It's why you're always wanting it all. And so the stage is set. Beneath the surface of your life, beneath the surface of all life, there may be a hidden engine of suffering, a restless force driving not just your actions, but your very sense of self. You felt it your whole life, but perhaps never named it. Now, for the first time, you're staring directly at it. What if everything you've been taught about fulfillment is backward? What if the secret to peace is not in adding more to your life, but in subtracting something you've never even imagined letting go of? The answer, if it exists, is buried deep within the human psyche and the philosophy of desire itself. To find it, we must first look at the roots of this hidden problem, the psychological and philosophical origins of our endless striving, the ancient wound behind our modern lives. When you finally stop and listen to the quiet underneath your thoughts, you begin to sense a pattern. Behind every emotion, every plan, every goal is the same pulse, a wanting. It feels personal, yet it's impersonal. It shows up as the urge to eat, to love, to win, to escape, to create, to destroy. It wears infinite masks. The more you watch it, the clearer it becomes. You are not the origin of this force. You are its stage. Arthur Schopenhauer named this undercurrent the will, not your willpower, but the cosmic, blind striving he saw at the heart of all existence. Life, to him, is not a rational project, but a restless impulse, endlessly generating new forms of hunger. What you call yourself may simply be the consciousness that rides atop this impulse. This is why, even when you achieve what you long for, peace slips through your fingers. You have momentarily satisfied the will's current demand, but its nature is to demand again. Modern psychology, without invoking Schopenhauer directly, echoes his insight. Neuroscience shows that dopamine, the neurotransmitter of motivation, is released not when we receive a reward, but when we anticipate one. Desire is wired to be self-renewing. We are built to chase, not to rest. Even the most powerful experiences of pleasure fade as our brain recalibrates to a new normal. This hedonic treadmill ensures that satisfaction is temporary and striving returns. Carl Jung, exploring the unconscious, found another layer of this dynamic. What you repress does not vanish. It returns as fate. Unmet needs, unlived potentials, and unacknowledged fears become hidden magnets pulling you towards certain choices. What feels like freedom may be compulsion in disguise. Without shadow work, the painful process of seeing what you've buried, your desires are not entirely your own. They are the echoes of wounds, instincts, and collective patterns older than you. Society amplifies this hidden machinery. Capitalism, advertising, and even well-meaning self-help industries are structured to monetize your discontent. Aldous Huxley warned of a future where people would be so conditioned by pleasure and distraction that they would love their servitude. That future is not coming. It's here. The will finds fertile ground in a culture that equates endless wanting with progress and virtue. You are taught to see stillness as laziness, sufficiency as failure, and contentment as stagnation. Yet the paradox grows sharper. Every external solution strengthens the internal problem. Each new purchase, achievement, or identity temporarily quiets the hunger, but also deepens the habit of seeking. Like scratching an itch that spreads the rash, desire feeds on the very attempts to cure it. This is the hidden problem. Not simply that you want, but that wanting has become the axis of your identity. You say, I am hungry, I am ambitious, I am in love. But underneath all those I am statements is one silent, ceaseless current. I am wanting. If Schopenhauer was right, then your entire sense of self may be a pattern of yearning rather than a stable being. Pause here. Let that possibility sink in. If your life has been organized around fulfilling desires, and if fulfilling them cannot end the cycle, what exactly are you building? A home or a labyrinth? This recognition is uncomfortable because it undermines the narrative we live by, that success, progress, or healing will one day complete us. But if the will is bottomless, then completion is an illusion. What we call happiness may be only a temporary lull, and the price of believing in it is perpetual restlessness. And yet, hidden inside this bleak diagnosis is a strange opening. For if desire is not truly yours, then perhaps it can be observed. If it can be observed, it can loosen. And if it can loosen, another kind of peace, one not dependent on having or becoming, might begin to appear. To move toward that possibility, though, we must first confront what happens when we ignore this truth. Because when the will drives unexamined, it shapes not only your private life, but the world around you. The consequences ripple outward, subtle, pervasive, and devastating. You rarely notice how deeply this hidden force shapes not only your inner life, but the architecture of the world you inhabit. Its fingerprints are everywhere. In your morning scroll through curated images of other people's perfect lives, in the quiet unease you feel after a purchase, in the policies governments craft to keep economies growing at any cost. Desire doesn't just move you, it designs society. Look closely and you'll see it in your relationships. How many connections are built not on genuine meeting, but on subtle transactions, the hope of being validated, admired, soothed, or saved? How often do you listen not to understand, but to be heard? Even love, the most celebrated of human experiences, can become an arena of bargaining between unmet needs. You chase a person as though they will complete you. When they don't, you move on, repeating the cycle. The tragedy is not just heartbreak. It's how invisible the machinery of wanting remains, even as it orchestrates your most intimate choices. The same pattern unfolds at the collective level. Entire economies depend on perpetual dissatisfaction. Newer, faster, shinier, the treadmill never stops. Politicians promise growth, not contentment. Social platforms amplify outrage and envy because those states keep you clicking. The will finds its perfect ecosystem here, multiplying its reach through algorithms designed to hijack your attention. What Schopenhauer described as a metaphysical force now looks eerily like a business model. Meanwhile, your nervous system absorbs the cost. Restlessness becomes baseline. You wake with a pulse of anxiety before you even check your phone. Your body, evolutionarily tuned for scarcity, now lives in an environment of overstimulation and abundance of choice, but never abundance of peace. The constant drip of dopamine from small digital rewards erodes your capacity for patience, reflection, and stillness. You feel busy but strangely hollow, connected but strangely alone. Cognitive biases reinforce the trap. The hedonic treadmill ensures each gain resets your expectations. The arrival fallacy convinces you happiness lies just beyond the next milestone. The scarcity mindset makes enough feel like too little. These are minor quirks. They're survival adaptations hijacked by a culture that thrives on keeping you wanting. Left unexamined, this cycle has a darker consequence still. It shapes your sense of self. You begin to see yourself as a consumer of experiences rather than a being capable of presence. Identity becomes a collage of what you pursue and display rather than what you truly are. When the will drives unchecked, even your highest ideals, justice, art, spirituality, can be subtly infected by the hunger to be seen as good, as brilliant, as enlightened. The search for peace becomes just another acquisition. This is why Schopenhauer's vision feels so unsettling. He was not merely describing individual frustration, but diagnosing a cosmic condition. Life, he argued, is suffering precisely because it is will. The striving is not a flaw to be fixed. It is the very engine of existence. From the worm inching through soil to the artist chasing a vision, all are animated by the same blind impulse. To live is to want, and to want is to hurt. Yet acknowledging this truth is not despair, it's clarity. Without seeing the cage, you cannot step outside it. Without naming the engine, you cannot choose a different fuel. The recognition itself begins to loosen the knot. When you observe how this force threads through your choices, you start to create a small gap, a moment of freedom, between impulse and action. But awareness alone is not enough. If the will is as deep as Schopenhauer claimed, then breaking free will require more than insight. It will require a radical shift in how you relate to your own desires, a rebellion against the oldest habit in the world. That rebellion, subtle, internal, and transformative, is where the path toward true peace begins. At first glance, the idea of rebelling against desire sounds impossible. How do you revolt against something that feels as natural as breathing? You cannot simply order yourself to stop wanting. But rebellion does not begin with separation. It begins with seeing. The first act of freedom is to recognize the impulse without automatically moving to satisfy it. In that brief pause, a new possibility appears, a life lived from awareness rather than compulsion. Schopenhauer believed that aesthetic contemplation and compassion were two cracks in the prison wall of the will. In moments of true artistic absorption, you lose the restless sense of I, striving to acquire or achieve. You are simply witnessing. The boundary between self and world softens. Likewise, in moments of genuine compassion, you momentarily transcend the ego's cravings. You feel another's suffering as your own, not as a transaction, but as a direct perception of shared being. These states are not permanent escapes, but they hint at a dimension of experience untouched by the hunger of the will. Modern psychology echoes this possibility. Practices like mindfulness and somatic awareness retrain the nervous system to tolerate urges without acting on them. Neuroscientists call this response inhibition, but in lived experience it feels like space, like breathing room inside your own mind. In meditation, you watch thoughts and cravings rise and fall without clinging. Over time, the pull of automatic desire weakens. You are still a human with needs and instincts, but you no longer mistake every impulse for a command. There is also a moral rebellion hidden in this practice. A society built on monetizing your dissatisfaction loses its power when you stop feeding it with your unconscious attention. Each time you pause before clicking, buying, scrolling, or reacting, you reclaim a small piece of sovereignty. Freedom in this sense is not dramatic, but incremental, 1,000 quiet refusals that accumulate into a different way of being. Yet breaking free is not only about abstaining, it's about reorienting. If the will manifests as endless acquisitas, then peace may arise from sufficiency, the deliberate cultivation of enough. This does not mean renouncing all pleasure or achievement, but seeing them clearly, holding them lightly. A beautiful meal, a creative project, a meaningful relationship, these can still be part of life. But they are no longer mistaken for salvation. They become expressions of life, not escape routes from it. This rebellion is radical precisely because it is inward. Outward revolutions rearrange power structures. Inward revolutions dismantle the compulsion that keeps those structures alive. When you no longer believe every craving will complete you, advertising loses its spell, status symbols lose their shine, and comparison loses its teeth. What remains is a quieter kind of joy, not the thrill of acquisition, but the stillness of presence. Paradoxically, this shift does not make you passive, it makes you more alive. Freed from automatic striving, your actions become deliberate, creative, and compassionate. You can work, love, and build without the hidden desperation that once drove you. Desire is still there, but it no longer dictates your identity. It becomes a servant rather than a master. This is the heart of the rebellion Schopenhauer hinted at, but rarely described in detail. A refusal to be entirely ruled by the will. It is not annihilation of desire, but its transformation. From a blind impulse into a conscious movement of life. In that transformation lies the first taste of peace that is not borrowed, not conditional, not fleeting. But the journey does not end here. Beyond rebellion lies something even deeper. A realization that reframes not only your relationship to desire, but your understanding of existence itself. The ultimate truth is waiting in that stillness, not as another idea to grasp, but as a shift in perception that changes everything. Imagine a moment when, for the first time, you are not trying to become anything. You are not reaching for your phone, not plotting your next move, not rehearsing who you think you should be. You are simply here. The hunger is there, but it is quiet, like an echo in another room. The air feels different, lighter, more spacious. You realize that nothing in this moment needs to be added or subtracted. It is whole. So are you. This is not apathy. It's not numbness. It's a clarity so complete that striving loses its urgency. You begin to see desire for what it is, a wave rising and falling in awareness. You are no longer the wave. You are the ocean, This shift is subtle yet seismic. The I who was always reaching dissolves, and what remains is presence, consciousness, life itself. Schopenhauer hinted at this state when he spoke of the denial of the will, a phrase often misunderstood as self-destruction. What he was really describing was a loosening of identification. The will continues to flow, but you no longer mistake it for your essence. The endless hunger becomes a phenomenon, not your core. In that gap arises a freedom that no achievement, possession, or status can grant. Psychologically, this is the moment when your nervous system discovers equanimity, the ability to remain stable amidst gain and loss, praise and blame, pleasure and pain. You still feel, you still act, but you are not pulled apart by every fluctuation. Philosophically, it's the recognition that your identity was never the craving self, but the awareness in which all cravings appear. This is the radical quiet at the heart of all contemplative traditions: Buddhism, Stoicism, mysticism, a quiet that Schopenhauer, despite his pessimism, saw as the only true path to peace. Notice how different this is from the promises you've been sold. The world tells you peace will come after you achieve, after you heal, after you improve. But this realization shows peace is not at the end of the path. It's what remains when the path itself dissolves. It was never hidden, only obscured by the noise of endless wanting. From this vantage point, even suffering changes. You no longer see it only as an obstacle, but as a teacher, the texture of existence that forced you to look deeper. Desire and pain become signals pointing beyond themselves. You begin to live not as a consumer of experiences, but as an expression of life, moving without clinging, giving without calculation, creating without desperation. And when you return to the ordinary world, to work, relationships, plans, you bring with you a new orientation. You still participate, but the compulsion is gone. You can enjoy success without being devoured by it, face loss without being annihilated by it. You can love without making the other person a vessel for your unmet needs. This is not perfection, but freedom in motion, the everyday miracle of acting without being driven. The deepest paradox is this: the peace you sought through endless striving was here before the striving began. It was not in the next achievement, but in the awareness looking for it. You were never truly lacking, only caught in the illusion of lack. The will may continue, but its power over you ends the moment you see it clearly. This is the ultimate truth Schopenhauer was circling around, the insight beyond his pessimism. Peace is not something you win from life, but something you uncover within it. To live this truth is to step out of the invisible cage, not by force, but by recognition. And now the question is no longer, how do I get free? But what will I create, give, or become from this freedom? The answer will not be another acquisition, another identity. It will be a life lived awake, a life where desire flows, but you remain the ocean, vast and unmoved.